there's this old expression, and the old expression, Joe, is too many cooks spoil the broth. And I'm going to present my evidence of that. I went and looked under the field of education, just did like a keyword search in education. I found so many educational associations. I found legislative educational committees. I found so much stuff, special boards and all this stuff, not to mention the people who run the school systems, right? Superintendents, principals, teachers, etc. Not to mention the State Board of Education and our friends at the federal level, the Federal Department of Education. In light of all of this attention that's being paid to education, why do we need all this stuff?
That's a good question. I think part of the problem is, and this goes back a long time, many of the things we've done in education, we've done without a vision or a sense of where we wanted to take the enterprise. And a lot of it has been around taking what we have now and trying to fix it because there's this problem. If we have some kids that get involved with drugs, we put in a program for that. If there are kids involved with alcohol, we put a program in for that. And it seems we keep grafting things onto the enterprise without sitting back or stepping back and saying to ourselves, you know, we need to take a look at what we're doing, decide what our main vision is, what our core mission is, and then organize all this stuff around it. I think if that were to happen, you might have fewer of these things you've talked about. But even if you didn't, people would be moving in the same direction. There would be a focus. I think our organizations, the ones represented here, are trying to do that. But it's a need that's in this business.
Okay.
I would certainly agree with Joe, and I would say that education is probably the most important thing government provides outside of safety and specific health of our citizenry. So it's not really a surprise to me that there are so many people who want to be involved with it. Excuse me, for the boards of education who I represent at CABE, their job is to connect the will of the community to the education of their students. And in doing that, you need lots of different stakeholders. You have to hear from the whole community. You hear from people who are taxpayers. You hear from people who are parents. You hear from those who have nobody in school. You hear from as many people as you can so that as we move this great entity forward, there is a support for it and an understanding of its importance.
Okay, Rich?
I would agree with Joe and Bob. I think that just from a business manager's perspective, we oversee so many different things. The facilities, we employ, you know, thousands and tens of thousands of people statewide. We have hundreds of thousands of students, and so there are just so many different constituents involved that there's a lot of people that have different views on how things should be done.
Well, I guess my editorial opinion would be that, and I think I fall on both sides that you're presenting, but I'm more on the side of Joe because everything seems to be ad hoc. It's the cause du jour. If there's a drug problem, put in a drug task force. If there's an ECS problem, put in an ECS task force. If there's a teacher evaluation problem, do that. And the problem that I have with it is if I ask the overall question, is education getting better? I find there's an inverse relationship between education getting better and all the groups that are tending to it. And what really gets me, Rich, right? How many ECS education task force would you guess we had?
At the moment?
Oh, at the moment. You mean there's 2 or 3 at the moment?
Yeah.
Not to mention the history.
Right.
Right? So, I mean,
Dozens.
I think that's the point.
Right.
And I really do think what happens, it's impossible to come to grips with everything that people are trying to say about education for the taxpayer, for the citizen, et cetera. So, I mean, I just wanted to throw that out because to me, some of it's almost like counterproductive,
You know,
Joe.
let me go to your question, is education getting better? If we look at what education was supposed to do for a long time, and that is give every kid a chance to learn, we're probably doing that as well as we've ever done it. But the expectation has changed, and it's changed legitimately. We now have to guarantee that every kid learns something enough so they can be college and career ready. Those are the present buzzwords. We're not designed to do that. We need to reform, we need to transform the system so that it is student-centered. And so, you know, part of the problem has been, you talked about, we keep putting an ad hoc thing here and an ad hoc thing there. I compare the present system to an ocean liner, And an ocean liner was fine for a long time, but it's no longer adequate for transportation needs today. So instead of coming up with a new system in education, we tried to put wings on an ocean liner, expect it to fly, and it isn't going to work. So we need to transform the system. We've got some thoughts along those lines.
Well,
We've
the other
talked
thing
about
I
the
would
others.
say to you too,
Yeah.
Joe, is education is an ocean liner. I mean, it's like, it certainly isn't a speedboat.
No.
I mean, if I'm running a small company, I can turn the small company like a speedboat. If I'm running a major corporation, it's like turning a battleship, and that's what you've got in education. So,
Well, that
go
being
ahead.
said, there are certainly local districts that are very successful. And if you look at it on the local level, there's a lot of planning, long-range strategic planning going on that has been successful. And there are districts out there that are doing things well and that aren't an ocean liner, that are able to turn things around quicker.
And if there weren't some of these groups, we wouldn't be able to hear the voices that need to be heard. Let me give you a perfect example. We're all members, the only members at this point, of the What Will Our Children Lose Coalition. Came about last year when there had been years of freezes to ECS, which is how education is
Educational
funded.
cost sharing, right.
That's how it's funded by the state. And we were very concerned we were heading into another year of that. And we'll talk, I'm sure, going on further in the program about other things that, as Joe said, have been sort of planted on top of what we're already doing. So there's a need for groups to get out, to be public, to come before the press, to come before the public, try to build support for all these new things that we all agree are good things, but have to be supported.
Okay. So it's another group.
Well, it's a year and a half. We're not quite as old as CAPS is, but we're working on it.
You're looking at Joe when you say
Yes,
that?
yes.
Let's talk about the organization.
I know.
not me.
I know. Look, I know it wasn't a personal shot, Joe.
Well,
I
it may
can
have
tell the
been.
way he made it because he couldn't make eye contact.
We'll talk
Yeah.
afterwards, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is teacher evaluation. I mean, this gets a lot of attention. From what I see, let me lead it off by saying what I see are the major components in teacher evaluation, or the things that drive it, are teacher tenure, evaluation of performance based on what? Based on what? And you get involved in collective bargaining, right?
Right.
And the third part is collective bargaining. So when you roll all those up together, let's talk for a few minutes about teacher evaluation. What is the state of affairs? I went on a trip this year. I think it was toward the beginning of the year, and there was a new law being considered for teacher evaluation. By the time I came back from the trip, they postponed it again.
No.
So there is a teacher.
Last year was the
yes.
year of education, and what it meant was really looking at how teachers and principals, to some extent, are evaluated and supported.
Okay,
There were
so let me
many
interrupt
meetings-
you. Let me
Sure.
interrupt you, Bob, by saying you're telling me there is a law.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so let's talk about the law. I'm sorry, of teacher
No problem.
evaluation.
It's a
Talk to me.
It's a very important topic because what we're undergoing is a real paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Up until this point, when I was teaching, for example, I was an English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I was evaluated on how well I presented materials, how well I taught the elements of a novel, for example, but it was all about my behavior. Now, we're all going to be evaluated not only on how we behave, but on the results of that behavior. So that for teachers and principals, 45% of the evaluation will be based on increase in student achievement for the students they're responsible for. That's a huge paradigm shift. There are 15 school districts piloting that new system this year, and the schedule calls for full implementation next school year of this whole new system in every school district.
Okay,
in the
so the
state.
law that was passed starts out with a pilot first.
Correct.
And then it progresses to all of Connecticut?
Correct.
Yes.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question. It's the evaluation of the results, 40% you said, Joe?
45%.
45%. What's the metric? Based on what?
If you teach in an area that's tested by a state test, half of that 45% is based on the results of the state test, either a mastery test or the CABE test for the high school teachers.
Okay.
If you're not, then it has to be some other standardized measure of student achievement, plus some other indicators as well.